Shalom, and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet, a horse Rabbi Elliot Malamet. I'm coming to you from Ottawa, Canada. Rabbi at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation at Highland Park, New Jersey. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski on Sheikh Chesed, New York City, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Sheikh Day School of Long Island. I'm going to start out, as we always do, noting that today is day 314 of the war, 214 days of captivity of the hostages. Every day, another day of excruciating agony for them and their families. We pray that they can be released and go home. We pray that the soldiers in the IDF can go home also. And there are, these are momentous days, of course, in Israel with the negotiations or not going on, and really the fate of these individuals in the balance, more so than they've been. So we start off with that kind of dedication and prayer. We're talking about Parasha Vaethanan, second Parsha in the book of Devarim. I think, I'm thinking about our friends at camp who are not going to have Parashat Vaethanan this year, because Camp Ramah in the Berkshires ends on the Thursday of this week, having just commemorated Tisha B'Av. So they won't get a Shabbat Nachamu named for the Haftarah of this Parsha, which is Isaiah chapter 40 as well. These are important moments in the camp calendar, and the way that the calendar works this year, with all the everything being a little later, so they won't get that opportunity. And so we also want to give a big shout out to our friends at Camp Ramah, who will be hearing this at home this week, because they will be going home.
One can only hope.
for Shabbat.
Actually,
but
you guys, of course, don't know this following small fact, but I maybe you got the email. There's been a whooping cough outbreak at camp today. On just the day on their left. I thought about our camp friends during the Haftarah in the morning on Tisha B'Av yesterday. Avar katsir kala kayitz v'anachnu lo noshanu. The harvest is past and the summer is gone, and we have not yet been saved.
It's very, very, look, they're very, to end camp with Tisha B'Av and these themes, I think, is very, very powerful. I remember we had to write a paper for Professor Gilman on something that had to do with ritual, and I wrote a paper about the end of camp and how the camp empties out. And I was on Hanhala, I was part of the leadership of camp, so we stayed behind. And really the feeling of emptiness, and it was a very deep feeling that here was the whole camp, hundreds and hundreds of people, and you're left alone, and it's a funerary experience, and you sit down, and I literally felt, seeing the empty camp.
Oh my gosh, the many years that, as we watch all the kids sobbing and saying goodbye, but the fact that this year, I mean, we can't go too extravagant about this, but the Friday night at camp of Shabbos Nachamu, when they sing the Nachamu Nachamu song, it's so beautiful. It's such a sense of it really is a sense of comfort and joy, and I will miss that this year.
Yeah, we'll all miss it. So let's talk about feelings of emotion, which is how the Parsha begins. Vaethanan, Moses begs God, and the Midrash makes quite a bit about Etchanan, that it's a different kind of prayer, that there's a whole kind of spectrum of words that we use about prayer, and this is a petition to God for something that he may think that he doesn't deserve. He petitions God at the time that God told Moses that he would not be going into the land, which is the episode of Mei Merivah, the water episode where Moses struck the rock as opposed to speaking to the rock. And Moses pleads to God to allow him to go in, and God says no. And Jeremy, could you just read the text for us? I don't have my text in front of me. I have to talk between screens. Just take that, and I don't have the book.
Vaethanan el Adonai ba'et hahilemor, and I pleaded with God. I gave this techina, and let's call that right up. And Rashi points out that that is Moses is just imploring for an undeserved grace.
Yeah,
I don't deserve this, but please, I want this so. And I said, I'm moving this phone around so I can get a little more light here in my apartment. Adonai Elohim, ata hachilota leharot et avdecha et godlecha v'et yadcha chazaka. Lord of the world, you've just begun to show me all of your greatness and all of your power. Asher mi'el v'shamayim u'ba'aretz asher ya'aseh k'ma'asecha v'chi gvurotecha, because there is like no one in heaven and earth who can do what you can do. Ebrana ve'eret ha'aretz hatova. Please let me cross and see the good land, asher be'ever ha'yarden, across the Jordan, ha'har hatov hazeh, this beautiful mountain, v'halevanon, Lebanon, of course, but rabbinically speaking, midrashically speaking, that means the site of the future temple to be built.
Okay.
But God was furious with me, lema'anchem, because of you people. And here in Devarim, the stress is not on a failing of Moses per se. The Bible gives a number of explanations for why Moses can't go. He's simply too old, even though that is contradicted by some other texts. He smote the rock instead of talking to it. He smashed the tablets at Sinai. But here, the different answer, which is you are the leader. These people, when they had the opportunity to cross over under the guidance of the spies, they wilted. So Vayitaber bi Adonai lemanchem. Vayitaber Adonai bi lemanchem. God was furious with me because of your reaction, v'lo shama elai, and didn't respond to me. Vayomer elai rav lach al tosef daber elai od b'davar hazeh. I've had it. That's enough. You are now excessive.
All right. Can we just dwell on those words for a minute, because those are hard words. And here I want to just illustrate. I mean, as we read this passage, I have a picture in my imagination that Moses is standing up in front of the people and giving the speech. And we're speakers. We know that a speech is not only the content of the speech, but it's the electricity of the room. This is not a room, but it's the electricity of
Zoom room.
Yeah, okay. The audience, the people are outside. We hope that they were focused on him, and there is a kind of elephant in the room, or an obstacle in this speech, which is that they know that this is the end. They know that Moses is not going in. And they know that Moses must be going through something. I want to imagine myself, as always, listening to this speech, not giving the speech, but listening to the speech, and asking, what's this poor guy going through? And here and I'm trying to hear the words as if he's saying them. Is he saying them with pathos? Is he saying them abruptly? Is he saying with like I accept this decree on me, or is he saying it with a kind of I'm angry. I'm angry that God did not give me this grace.
I would offer a slightly different interpretation. I think what's striking in this parsha is that there are at least 3 different words for anger, all attributed to God. Vayitaber, vayitanaf, and vayicharaf. I think Moses is more disconsolate than angry. He's upset. And, listening to the verse read, it finally struck me what's so filled with pathos here. So he says, Ebra Nava Era, let me cross so I can see the land. And God's answer, which is never going to be said out loud in quite these words, are Tir'eh v'lo ta'avor. right? He wanted to cross in order to see, and God said, you can see, but not cross. And that, so in a sense, Moses gets half of what he wanted, but it's disordered. So he
Right.
That's
doesn't
really
get it at
interesting.
all.
So
That's
is
really
there,
interesting. The chiastic structure. Let me cross and see. Do not cross, but still see visually. They're seeing from a distance and seeing up close. Moses said, no, no one, when I said I want to see it, I didn't mean like in a picture book. I wanted to go there.
right. So is God being harsh to him?
I mean, I find this feature of the book of Deuteronomy tremendously religiously satisfying, which is not to say that it's not the pathos of Moses' frustration. Of course, it is true. It's even Moses, right? Every life is marked by the unfulfilled dreams. Like the rabbis say, nobody achieves even half of their dreams in their lifetime. And Moshe Rabbeinu is the avatar of the Jewish people. He's the avatar of Jewish teachers and sages and prophets. Aviha Nevi'im, Lokam Moshe, and there's nobody even like him. And he too is going to end his life on the other side of the Jordan. And the fact that the Torah ends in Deuteronomy 34 on the other side of the Jordan, and that our reading of it, even though on Simchas Torah we do read the beginning of Joshua, on Pesach we read the beginning of Joshua where they do cross over, the liturgical life of the Jewish people, we kind of never cross over. We're always journeying. And I find that just religiously very, very satisfying, if also somewhat heartbreaking.
So it's at the end of that passage, where he does say, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go up in the mountain. You're going to command Joshua. And then it says, we get verse 29, Vaneshev Bagai, Mul Bet Peor. We stayed in the valley opposite Bet Peor. And Bet Peor is important in the sense that that's where, the second greatest catastrophe occurs in the desert, the apostasy of the people and the plague that afflicts, that kills 24,000 people. We saw that at the end of the book of Bamidbar. So I want to go to the beginning of chapter 4. Then, after Moses seems to accept this, and the question as to how he accepts this, is this a grudging acceptance, a loving acceptance? Does he not go gently into that good night, to kill a paraphrase of a poem? He makes this pivot, and much of Deuteronomy is going to be structured around this pivot, and the pivot is V'ata Yisrael, and now Israel, Shema el hachukim ve'el hamishpatim, hearken to the laws and to the regulations, Asher anochi melamed etchem, that I'm teaching you to observe, Leman tichyu, so that you'll live, Uvatem v'yirishtem et haaretz, that you will enter and take possession of the land, Asher Adonai Elohei avotechem noten lechem, that God, the God of your fathers, is giving you. V'ata Yisrael. It's such a hard pivot, but it's a necessary pivot, and it's the pivot to the content of learning that is such an important theme of this book. You need to learn. I'm teaching you. You need to repeat this, and I just want to get you to reflect on, how you see Moses, or how you read this verse, basically, or how it's really, I'm now changing the story here. And I'm becoming the teacher for you, or let me get you to reflect on this word leman tichyu, right? So that you'll live. I'll just
And I
throw.
think that's the key word, is techyu, because part of what's going on here is Moses is coming to understand on a very basic level that he's going to die. It's not only with the unfulfilled dreams, but he's coming to recognize that even if her dreams would all be fulfilled, he would still die. And that's hard to accept. And I think that one of the things that many people struggle with, if I'm not projecting too much on everyone else, is how do we live on after death? And this is Moses's attempt finally to crystallize a message, because now that he's understanding he's not going to live, he has to figure out how he's going to live on. And the way he's going to live on is through teaching, something which resonates with all of us who have the title teacher, and with this message of Torah, because what is eternal is Torah. And I just want to add one more thing. We often mention that one of the great things about the Varim is that they're little pieces and big pieces in the liturgy throughout the day, throughout the year. And one of my favorite verses is which here is a direct reference to Baal Peor. Those of you who did not give in, perhaps to your urges, as seductive as they may have been, you're alive today. But we say that in the Torah service, because for us, what is eternal is the Torah. And we grab onto eternity by grabbing the Aseh Chaim, the literal
Stays in Torah.
The rollers of the Torah when we have an aliyah, but also metaphorically and metaphysically by studying Torah.
I love this. This is right on. We all know, each and every one of us, the day we were born, we know that life is finite. It's one of the things that makes life precious. And the eternality is not that I personally am going to live forever, but that we are going to go on and live. And I find this tremendously compelling. Moshe Rabbeinu, may say, wait a minute, I'm Moshe Rabbeinu here. You mean I'm not going to get to go across? It's okay. The people will go across and they will continue to build a life. It reminds me, by the way, I love what you said, Barry, about how do I go on and live after my death. And I do think that is true. Individuals die, the community never dies. But this reminds me of another passage in the Bible, which we read on the Shabbat before Purim, which is about the downfall of King Saul. And I remember that Yochanan Mufs, our great teacher at the seminary, by the time I came to the seminary, he was very old and sick, but I knew him also as a congregant at Anshe Chesed. He stressed in one of his articles, one of his key articles, about the role of the prophet, that the prophet advocates for the people against God, advocates for God against the people. And one of his examples is this great scene in which King Shaul, Saul, great talent, but fatally flawed character, and he doesn't quite carry out, God's command is very, very harsh, like wipe out every single Amalekite, and in fact, Saul lets the people get away with taking some plunder instead. But when God says, Nicham, this is 1 Samuel 15, and it's the Haftarah for Parshat Zachor. Nichamti ki himlachti et Shaul HaMelech. I'm sorry I ever made King Saul, made Saul the king. Ki shav me'acharai, because he's not following my commandments, v'et devarai, and my words. Et devarai lo hikim, and he hasn't fulfilled my words. And so that's God's firing of Saul. And it says, Vayichar lishmuel, and Shmuel is very upset by this. Vayizak el Adonai kol halayla, and he cries out to God all night long. The next line is Vayashkem Shmuel baboker likrat Shaul baboker. Vayashkem Shmuel likrat Shaul baboker. And Samuel gets up the next morning to go meet Shaul and to give him the message of his firing. Now, the Mufs makes the great literary connection that it says he cried out all night, and that suggests that there was this long debate. The debate is not recorded in the Tanakh there in 1 Shmuel 15, but Muf suggests that there's this long imploring, this va'et chananing, and he's begging, Shmuel's begging, and he's arguing, and he's saying, why can't we give him another chance? And when that doesn't work, Vayashkem Shmuel likrat Shaul baboker. He gets up the next morning to do his job. And I feel that the same kind of vibe is going on in this passage that you're referring to at the end of Deuteronomy 3 and the beginning of 4. Come on, please, 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 let me cross the Jordan. All right, that's not going to happen. Let me teach you about the laws.
Right. Okay. So let me focus then again about Laman Tichyu. And there is a strain of commentary that says it's not only about physical life, but it's about meaning in life. It's about, giving your life vigor. It's about differentiating your life from an animal life. A human life is a life lived with meaning, a life lived with purpose, a life lived that's touched by aspects of transcendence and holiness. And so here I'm going to give you these statutes and these rules and this way of life so that you'll live your life. And we'll come back to this theme often as we move through Dvarim, especially at the end, because at the end it's uvechartem b'chayim. You should choose life, and we have our conversation about that. Namely, is it really about choosing life, or is it about choosing the way you live your life? And here I think Moses is introducing that theme to us right here at the beginning of the speech. So good job, Moses. Here, I want to. Okay, I want to turn to the beginning of chapter 5, and we'll spend some time talking about this, which is Moses is talking about the laws and statutes, and he is reminding the people of Ma'amad Har Sinai, their presence at Mount Sinai, where God revealed the Ten Commandments to the people. Look at how he describes the scene. If you look at chapter 5, verse 2, we'll leave out verse 1. God, our God, cut with us a covenant at Chorev. Lo et avotenu karat Adonai et habrit hazot. Not with our fathers did God cut this covenant. Ki itanu, but with us. Anachnu, us. Ele, fo, hayom. You, here, us, today. Kulanu, chayim. All of us who are alive. I just find that to be very, very clever. And I think it's a great move. It's a great move that Moses is making here.
What is the move?
The move is he's taking a whole generation that were not there. This is a new generation, and he's saying to the new generation, you were there, okay? And he's inviting this new generation to leap with him in the imaginative experience of Sinai. And as I said, that's a great move, because it's a move that I think all of us reproduce in some way or another in the religious experience.
So what I'd like to suggest is that he's redefining the partners to the covenant.
Okay.
It's not God and the Israel that was, it's God and Israel today. So whoever is part of Israel today, that's who the covenant was with. It doesn't matter whether you were at that event. By being alive, you become present. And I think what makes this clear, at least to me, is the part that we're not going to get to discuss, which is in chapter 6, which is the question of the wise son. What is the meaning of all these laws and statutes? And the answer is that God took us out of Egypt. And he rehearses the history a little bit, and then he says, because of that, I'm teaching you these commandments. And Israel is a living people, not a historical people in the sense that it's ever completely in the past. It's only alive as long as there's someone who is present.
Okay. But the first generation that experiences is marked by this extraordinary experience. Whether they're great or not is great, it's not relevant to me. They have this experience. The second generation is literally the second generation. They live, or Moses is telling them, I want you to live with this memory. You may have heard this memory from your parents, but I'm telling you that it is yours. Now, the question that I have is this the way that we are to encounter or interact with these formative events? So we are just off of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the destruction of the temples, and we are in a year of October 7th, this year of terrible catastrophe and crisis and mourning, endless mourning and anguish. And we're living through this now. It's part of our living memory. And to a certain extent, this is the event that's going to define this generation. It's already defining the generation of people, the young generation that is soldiers from 18 to what, 50 something, people who are, fighting in the army and fighting in reserves. This is defining their lives, and it's defining Israel probably for the next 40 years, maybe 50 years, the same way the Yom Kippur War defined Israel up until October of 2023. And the question then is, what lies beyond that? Before October the 7th, we were talking about, generation 4, that there's the founders generation, there's the generation after the founders that continued that work, the third generation, which makes it to, brings it up to scale. And then the fourth generation already has to ask, what are we about? Because they're no longer in direct living memory of the founders or the founding generation. It's precisely where we are after 75 years of Israel's existence. And these events have basically shattered and have enabled a new founding to take place. The question I have, though, is Moses aware of the fact that this second generation does not have the same experience, and therefore he's layering it on very thick to them, that this is your experience. I want you to have this. I want you to think of yourselves as if you yourself have had that experience. What do you think?
So I think that what he's telling them is that even though they have not lived through the experience, they can partake of it. And I think that's the key thing. We cannot relive history. We cannot go back and experience, say, the Civil War. But we can partake of it to some extent. And, as I said before, what we're after here is creating a living tradition, something that we can receive from our parents and grandparents that belongs to the people as a whole, and something that we can then in turn hand down to our children and grandchildren.
So listen, I think this is right on target.
Go ahead.
I don't think that it's I don't think that he's like when you said, Elliot, lay it on thick, this is your experience. He's not telling them, a lie. He is evoking their powers of imagination to understand that it is their story. And I think that religion, we've discussed this in other contexts. Religion works best in the register of poetry, not in the register of prose. It's not, in my opinion, like there are, of course, facts to religion, this is kosher, this is treif, this is how you behave, and those things are like facts. But religion works best in the register of imagination, and to say to people, listen, what I want you to do is really cultivate your, to see yourself participate emotionally, participate imaginatively in Exodus, in covenant, and think of all the ways in which we 21st century Jews have to do that, to make, the Holocaust your story, to make Zionism your story, to make, the various Spanish expulsion your story, to enter in, especially we're saying this, 24 hours after the end of Tisha B'Av, to make the Churban Habayit, the destruction of the temples, make those things your story. And you can do that. Not only you can, you really, as a Jew, you're supposed to, you gotta try to feel yourself, that those things really, grip your heart.
Right. Okay. So the ritual life of a Jew reenacts all of those moments for us, so that we see ourselves as if we left Egypt, so that we see ourselves as if we are present at Sinai. We don't use those exact words, but clearly, the experience of reading the Torah, reading the Decalogue at Shavuot, and staying up all night to study Torah is to reenact something, to reenact the Sukkah, and I think contemporary Judaism with other holidays like Hanukkah and Purim, of course, and Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, these are all, in a sense, reenactments, and they all to the Jewish life that is deeply involved in the calendar. These are all that life ritualizes these moments so that you live in that symbolic reenactment at various different points. Barry, you mentioned, the Civil War, and I think one of the great lamentable facts of American life is that there are no reenactments other than a very, very, very small, self-selected group of people who
And those guys are weirdos.
yeah,
Those guys are
that's
weirdos.
the
They
point.
actually have some in Huntington from time to time.
We regard them with a certain kind of disdain because they're so crazy for this thing. They live there, but there has never been a ritualized way of reenactment or at least rekindling.
It's interesting. So on the perhaps farcical end of things, there is a tradition, certainly here in New York, to play Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie on Thanksgiving.
Okay,
But there are people that read the Declaration of Independence on July
July
4th.
4th, yes,
But what I would suggest, to build on what Jeremy said, is that we like to think of ourselves as a historical people, but I prefer to see ourselves as an imaginative people or a literary people. And what drives this home for me is as you know, there's a rabbinic discussion of what the Sukkot are supposed to represent. Is it supposed to be the housing that our ancestors lived in while they were wandering in the wilderness? That's one answer. The other answer is that it's actually God's clouds of glory. Well, I think we can agree that that is literary or imaginative and probably not so historical, except for certain segments of our community. And what gives power, I think, to Jewish tradition is that it invites our imagination to develop and to see things that we never would otherwise see. It's not to see what is there, it's to see what isn't there and make it here.
right. And what I'm saying is that
This is the theme of one of the most important books of 20th century, academic Jewish scholarship, Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi's book,
Yep.
Zachor, Remember, in which he draws exactly as you just said, Barry, that his history, that is to say, a dispassionate inquiry into what happened in the past, is, in Yerushalmi's phrase, the faith of fallen Jews. And it's what Jews went to when they could no longer get in touch with memory, which is an imaginative discipline to make a tradition come alive. History is dispassionate, memory is overwhelmingly passionate, and that's where I think religion really plays.
look, I think, and then in here we have to kind of bring this to conclusion, which is, so many points in this parsha are in fact reenacted or re-spoken on a very regular basis. There are, like, I don't know, 6 verses that are part of you quoted Vatem Advikim Adonai Elohechem. We read that, we say that verse at the Torah reading. Of course, the 10 Commandments here, the Shema, which we didn't even touch, you recited.
I think
Exactly. Atare Taladah. It was right? So a lot of these verses appear regularly, and in a way, in Judaism, we're constantly trying to reenact these moments. We're constantly trying to imagine ourselves simultaneously in our present and in our past and in our future. And we've said this many times, but there's what America can learn from us in terms of just a theory. That is to say, if people were to have regular contact with formative events, the reenactments, in a kind of civil religious way, there would be a different kind of national conversation, I think, in this country. Look, in Israel, and here we'll pivot to that. The Declaration of Independence. It's not that it's reenacted on Yom Ha'atzmaut, but over the year before October the 7th, the Declaration of Independence was paraded at demonstrations, and it was placed on buildings in large. I mean, it became the formative symbol for Israel, and the iconic image of the Declaration, to which everybody had to relate, which is saying that we have a formative point, and here this is our formative point. This moment at Sinai is the formative point, and the moments that we are reenacting them are the formative points as well, I think, for all of us on a daily basis. Well, and with that, friends, we are going to conclude. We want to thank you for watching, for listening. We truly, truly appreciate it. Honor you for that. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for being loyal, fans of Parsha Talk. And
because this conversation happens not only with us, but with you. You are part of our conversation.
You're so important to us. We want to wish all of our friends at Ramah a good year as they end their summer. They hear this at home now. And for everyone else, I want to wish you a good Shabbat.
Shabbat shalom.
See you next week on Parsha Talk. Shabbat shalom.